You have 30 days before they come for you. Trevor Sterling said it with cold certainty at his Gerald Miller's funeral, watching the widow crumble under the weight of debts she didn't know existed. He'd orchestrated this moment for 6 years, waited for Beverly to become desperate enough to accept his offer. 1 year, complete ownership, total control. Trevor didn't want to save her, he wanted to ruin her for anyone else, and he had 365 days to do it. Welcome back, my dark romance lovers. Thank you for trusting this channel. Comment below the city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, so I can bring you more addictive stories that will leave you breathless and longing for more. Your support means the world to me. Trevor Sterling stood at the back of Gerald Miller's funeral, watching Beverly, the woman he'd craved for 6 years, break apart at the altar. Black dress clinging to her frame, mascara streaking her face. He shouldn't be, thinking about how badly he wanted to taste those tears. Gerald was his best friend, his business partner, the man who married the only woman Trevor ever wanted. But Gerald was dead now, drowned off the coast 3 weeks ago. Tragic accident, they said. But Trevor knew better. After the service, Beverly's eyes met him across the cemetery with recognition, fear, and something darker. He approached her, and up close, she was devastating. 28 years old, the black dress hugged curves he'd memorized from a distance, the dip of her waist, the graceful line of her throat he wanted to mark with his mouth. Trevor. His name left her lips like a question, soft and uncertain. I'm sorry for your loss, he said. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment he saw past the grief to the intelligent woman beneath, the one Gerald had tried so hard to dim. Are you? Her voice was hoarse, raw. You barely came around the last 2 years. Because watching her play house with Gerald was torture. Because every dinner party was an exercise in restraint. Every business meeting where Gerald casually touched her shoulder or kissed her cheek made Trevor want to break things. Because he'd wanted to burn Gerald's world down just to pull her from the ashes. But he'd been patient. He was always patient when it mattered. Gerald and I had complications, Trevor said carefully, his voice low and controlled. Business matters. Business. Beverly's laugh was hollow, bitter. Everything was always business with you two. If she only knew. Trevor reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a matte black business card, his private number. He held it out between 2 fingers, and when she didn't immediately take it, he caught her wrist, gently, but firm enough that she felt the strength in his grip. Her pulse jumped beneath his thumb. When you're ready to talk about Gerald's debts, he said quietly. His eyes locked on hers. Call me. Beverly's face stilled. The shock drained so fast he thought she might collapse. What debts? Trevor leaned in, close enough to smell her perfume mixed with grief, jasmine, and something sweeter, something that made his jaw tighten with want. The ones that died with him, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The ones that are now yours, Beverly. You have 30 days. I don't. Her breath hitched. What are you talking about? Gerald had money. We had savings. You had illusions. Trevor released her wrist and pressed the card into her palm, his fingers lingering just long enough to feel her tremble. Gerald owed $2.3 million to people who don't care that he's dead. They'll come for everything, and if you're not careful, they'll come for you too. No. She shook her head frantically, tears spilling fresh down her cheeks. No, that's not possible. He wouldn't. He did. Trevor straightened, his expression going cold. Beverly's hands were shaking so badly the card nearly slipped from her fingers. She looked gutted, and Trevor felt nothing but the cold, patient satisfaction of a man who'd been waiting 6 years for this exact moment. Why are you telling me this? Her voice broke on the last word. If you were really his friend, you have a choice. Trevor's gaze held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You can ignore this, pretend I'm lying, Wait for them to show up at your door in the middle of the night, or—" He paused, let the word hang between them like a blade. "You can call me, and I'll make it all go away, Beverly." He turned to walk away, got 3 steps, then looked back over his shoulder. She'd never looked more beautiful. 30 days, he repeated softly. "After that, I can't help you." Then he walked away. He'd already waited 6 years. He could wait 30 more days. The hunt was over. Now came the claiming. The first call came 3 days after the funeral. Beverly was sitting in Gerald's home office, her office now, surrounded by mountains of paperwork she didn't understand. Bank statements, investment portfolios, legal documents with words like default and foreclosure stamped across them in angry red ink. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Miller?" The voice was male, smooth, with an edge that made her spine stiffen. "This is Andrew Dave from Titan Holdings. I'm calling about your late husband's outstanding debt of $340,000. We'd like to discuss repayment options." Beverly's hand tightened around the phone. $340,000? There must be some mistake. "No mistake, Mrs. Miller. The loan was secured against your property at 1247 Ashwood Drive. We'll need payment in full within 14 days, or we'll be forced to begin foreclosure proceedings." The line went dead. Beverly sat frozen, staring at the phone in her trembling hand. 14 days. Foreclosure. This couldn't be real. The second call came an hour later. A woman this time, cold and businesslike, representing a casino in Atlantic City. Gerald owed $180,000 in gambling debts. They wanted it now. The third call came at midnight. This one wasn't smooth or professional. The man's voice was rough, dangerous, the kind that made her lock every door and window in the house. "Your husband borrowed money from people who don't like waiting, Mrs. Miller. We'll be seeing you soon." Beverly didn't sleep that night, or the next. She spent 48 hours drowning in Gerald's secrets, the loans he'd taken out using her name as collateral, the credit cards maxed to their limits, the investment schemes that had collapsed and taken everything with them. $2.3 million. Trevor had been telling the truth. By the 5th day, Beverly was standing in her kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at the black business card she'd kept in her pocket like a talisman. Trevor Sterling's name embossed in silver. A phone number. Nothing else. She'd sworn she wouldn't call him. Sworn she'd find another way. But there was no other way. The banks had laughed at her loan applications. Her family had nothing to give. Friends had stopped answering her calls the moment they heard the word debt. She was alone. Desperate. Beverly picked up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the first ring. "Beverly." Not a question. A statement. Like he'd been waiting. "I need to see you." Her voice was steadier than she felt, stronger than the fear clawing at her throat. "Tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office." A pause. "Don't be late." The line went dead before she could respond. Trevor's penthouse office occupied the entire top floor of Sterling Tower, a gleaming monument to wealth and power in the heart of downtown. She felt small stepping off the private elevator, out of place in her simple black dress and worn heels. The receptionist, a stunning blonde in designer everything, barely glanced at her before waving her through. Trevor was standing by the windows when she entered, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn when the door closed behind her. "You waited 5 days," he said. "Longer than I expected." Beverly's jaw tightened. "I was trying to find another option." "And?" Now he turned, and the full force of his attention hit her like a physical thing. Those cold gray eyes tracked over her face, her body, missing nothing. "Did you find one?" She lifted her chin. "You know I didn't." "No." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I knew you wouldn't." He moved toward her with that predatory grace she remembered from the funeral, closing the distance until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Beverly sat in the leather chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Trevor didn't sit. He leaned against the desk instead, arms crossed, studying her like she was a problem to be solved. "Tell me what you know," he said. "2.3 million in debts." Her voice was flat. "The house is mortgaged 3 times over. Credit cards, personal loans, gambling debts to people who've started calling me in the middle of the night. Gerald destroyed everything, and I didn't even know. You didn't want to know." Trevor's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel, but the truth of it stung anyway. "You stopped asking questions years ago, Beverly. Easier to pretend everything was fine." She flinched, because he was right. She'd stopped asking Gerald about money, about his late nights, about the way he'd started drinking more and smiling less. She'd built a life out of willful ignorance, and now she was paying for it. "Can you help me?" The words came out smaller than she intended. Weaker. Trevor tilted his head, considering. "Yes." Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. "Thank you. I can pay you back. I just need time." "No." The word cut through her hope like a blade. "No?" Beverly stared at him. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean you can't pay me back." Trevor pushed off the desk and moved behind it, pulling a file from the drawer. He set it in front of her, thick, official-looking, with her name typed across the top. "Not with money. You don't have any. You won't have any. By the time Gerald's creditors finish picking over the bones of his estate, you'll be lucky to walk away with the clothes on your back." Beverly's throat closed. "Then how?" "I'll pay every cent Gerald owes." Trevor's eyes locked on hers. All $2.3 million. The house, the credit cards, the casino debts, the loans from men who would have hurt you to make a point. Gone. Erased. You'll be free. It sounded too good to be true. It was. "What do you want in return?" Beverly asked quietly. Trevor smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and electric. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Yes, you do." Trevor opened the file, revealing page after page of legal text. A contract. "1 year, Beverly. You belong to me for 1 year. Not as my wife, not as my girlfriend, as my possession." Her blood turned to ice. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious." He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the desk. "You'll live where I say. Go where I say. Do what I say. Answer to me and only me. For 365 days, every breath you take, every decision you make, goes through me first." Beverly shot to her feet, fury overriding fear. "You're insane. I'm not some object you can own. Aren't you?" Trevor straightened, utterly calm in the face of her rage. "Gerald treated you like property. Put your name on loans without asking. Made decisions about your life without consulting you. At least I'm being honest about what I want." "This is different." "Is it?" He rounded the desk, moving into her space until she backed up against the chair. "I'm offering you a way out, Beverly. Freedom from debt. Safety from the people who want to collect. A year of your life in exchange for the rest of it back." "And what happens during that year?" Her voice shook. "What exactly do you expect from me?" Trevor's gaze dropped to her mouth, then slowly traveled back up to her eyes. The heat in that look made her breath catch. "Everything." One word. A promise and a threat. Beverly shook her head, even as something dark and unwanted twisted low in her stomach. "I can't. This is insane. You're asking me to—" "I'm not asking." Trevor reached out and tucked a loose curl behind her ear, his fingers grazing her cheek. The touch was almost gentle. Almost. "I'm offering. The choice is yours, Beverly. Sign the contract. Give me 1 year, and I'll make all of this disappear. Or don't. Walk out that door. See how long you last before Gerald's mistakes bury you." She wanted to slap him, wanted to scream that he was a monster for even suggesting this, but the words died in her throat because they both knew the truth. She had no other options. She was trapped. And he knew it. "Why?" Beverly's voice broke. Why are you doing this? Trevor's hand dropped away, but his eyes never left hers. I'm not doing this out of kindness, Beverly. His voice went soft, dangerous. I'm collecting what should have been mine 6 years ago. The weight of that confession settled over her like a shroud. 6 years ago, the night Gerald introduced them, the way Trevor had looked at her then, intense, hungry, wrong in every way that mattered. She'd felt it even through the champagne haze of her engagement party, the weight of his attention, the darkness in his smile. She'd told herself she was imagining things. She wasn't. You're insane, she whispered. Probably. Trevor picked up a pen and held it out to her. Sign the contract, Beverly, or don't. But decide now. This offer expires the moment you walk out that door. Beverly stared at the pen, at the contract, at the man who was offering to save her life in exchange for owning it. She thought about the threatening phone calls, the foreclosure notices, the men with rough voices who'd promised to see her soon. She thought about Gerald, the husband she'd never loved, the man who'd destroyed her without a second thought. She thought about the next year of her life and the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Beverly took the pen. Her hand shook as she signed her name on the dotted line. Trevor watched every stroke, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he took the contract, closed the file, and locked it in his desk drawer. Good girl. The words made her skin flush with shame and something worse. What happens now? She asked. Trevor's smile was slow and satisfied. Now, Beverly, you come home with me. You're mine now, widow. Trevor's penthouse was exactly what Beverly expected. Everything was sharp angles and expensive taste. Black leather and chrome fixtures, abstract art. Your room is down the hall, Trevor said, leading her through the expansive living space. Second door on the left. Beverly followed silently, her small overnight bag clutched in her hands. She hadn't been allowed to pack much. Trevor had sent people to handle the rest. His people. Moving her life into his space, like she was cargo being relocated. He stopped at a closed door and pushed it open. The bedroom was larger than her, and Gerald's master bedroom had been. King-sized bed with pristine white linens. A walk-in closet already, filled with clothes she hadn't chosen. An ensuite bathroom with a rainfall shower and a tub big enough for two. It was perfect. The closet is stocked with everything you'll need, Trevor said, leaning against the doorframe. Sizes are correct. I had my assistant handle it. Of course he did. Of course he knew her sizes without asking. Beverly set her bag down carefully, keeping her back to him. Where's your room? End of the hall. A pause. Why? Planning to visit. She turned, met his amused gaze with frost. No. Planning to avoid it. Trevor's smile was slow, dangerous. We'll see how long that lasts. Before she could respond, he straightened and moved down the hall, calling over his shoulder. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. The door clicked shut behind him, and Beverly was alone. She lasted 3 hours before the walls started closing in. It was after midnight that hunger and restlessness drove Beverly from her room. Their penthouse was dark except for dim lights along the hallway. Silent except for the hum of the city 40 floors below. She padded toward the kitchen in bare feet and an oversized t-shirt, expecting to find it empty. Trevor was there instead. He stood at the island with a glass of whiskey, still dressed in his suit pants and white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, top buttons undone, looking like the most handsome man on earth. He didn't look up when she entered, but she knew he'd heard her. Can't sleep? He asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Beverly crossed her arms over her chest, suddenly aware of how little she was wearing. I was hungry. There's food in the fridge. Help yourself. She moved past him carefully, maintaining distance, and opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with everything. Fresh fruit, cheese, wine, meals prepared by what was clearly a professional chef. She grabbed bottled water instead, needing something to do with her hands. When she turned back, Trevor was watching her, not casually, not politely, watching her intensely. His gray eyes tracked the movement of her throat as she swallowed, the way her fingers gripped the bottle, the curve of her bare legs beneath the hem of her shirt. Beverly's pulse jumped. "Stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you own me." Trevor's smile was razor sharp. "I do own you, Beverly, for the next 364 days, 23 hours, and—" He checked his watch. 42 minutes. You signed the contract." "That doesn't mean—" "It means everything." He set his glass down and moved toward her with that fluid, dangerous grace. "It means when I look at you, I see what's mine. When you walk into a room, I track your every move because you belong to me. When you stand there in my kitchen, wearing nothing but a t-shirt, I think about all the ways I'm going to break you down and rebuild you exactly how I want." Beverly's back hit the refrigerator. She hadn't even realized she was retreating. "You're trying to scare me." "I'm trying to be honest." Trevor stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You wanted to know why I'm really doing this. Ask me again." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should walk away. Go back to her room, lock the door, and pretend this year would pass quickly. But she didn't. "Why are you really doing this, Trevor?" His hand came up, fingers grazing her jawline with devastating gentleness. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she forgot how to breathe. "I've wanted you since the moment Gerald introduced us 6 years ago," he said quietly, his voice rough with something that might have been restraint. "Because watching him touch you, kiss you, take you home every night made me want to burn the world down. Because you were never his, Beverly. You were always meant to be mine." The confession hung between them, raw and dangerous. Beverly's lips parted, words forming and dying on her tongue. She should be horrified, furious. Instead, heat pooled low in her stomach, traitorous and undeniable. Trevor's eyes darkened like he could read every thought racing through her mind. His thumb pressed against her lip one more time before his hand dropped away. "Go to bed, Beverly." His voice was pure command, pure warning. "Before I show you exactly why I'm doing this." She didn't move, couldn't move, trapped between the cold steel of the refrigerator and the heat of his body. "Now," he said softly. This time, Beverly ran. She fled down the hallway and into her room, closing the door and pressing her back against it, her chest heaving like she'd sprinted a mile. Behind her, in the darkness of the penthouse, she heard Trevor's low, satisfied laugh. And she knew, despite the separate bedrooms, despite the walls between them, despite every instinct screaming at her to resist, she was already his. 2 weeks into living with Trevor, Beverly was unraveling. She felt it in the way her hands shook when Trevor entered a room, in the way her body responded to his voice, low, commanding, always watching. In the sleepless nights where she lay in her expensive bedroom, acutely aware that he was just down the hall, separated by nothing but drywall and her rapidly crumbling willpower. Grief over Gerald had morphed into something complicated and ugly. Guilt that she didn't miss him the way a widow should. Shame that she'd mourned the loss of security more than the loss of love. And beneath it all, a dangerous, electric pull toward the man who owned her through contract and was slowly claiming everything else. Trevor was patient, terrifyingly patient. He never pushed, never demanded more than what was written in their agreement. But his presence was constant, suffocating, his hand at the small of her back when they walked through the penthouse, his eyes tracking her every move. And now, he was taking her out. "Wear the red dress," Trevor had said that morning, barely looking up from his laptop. "We have an event tonight." Beverly had wanted to refuse, wanted to ask what gave him the right to dictate her wardrobe, her schedule, her life. But she'd signed the contract. She'd given him exactly that right. So she wore the red dress. The charity gala was held in a historic hotel downtown, dripping with old money and older reputations. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, string quartets playing in corners, while donors wrote checks with more zeros than Beverly had ever seen in her life. She felt exposed in the crimson gown, a fitted silhouette that hugged every curve, a neckline that dipped just low enough to be provocative without crossing into vulgarity. Diamond earrings she hadn't chosen sparkled at her ears. Trevor's choices, all of it. His hand never left the small of her back, her waist, possessive touches that announced ownership to everyone watching, and they were watching. "Who is she?" Beverly heard a woman whisper as they passed. "Trevor Sterling's newest acquisition," another replied with a knowing smile. Beverly's jaw tightened, but Trevor's hand pressed firmer against her spine, a warning. "Behave." He introduced her to business partners, politicians, socialites, who smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes. "This is Beverly," he'd say, never elaborating, never explaining, just her name and the clear implication that she was his. Beverly played her part, smiled, nodded, sipped champagne she didn't taste, until Calvin Hale approached. He was handsome in that easy, charming way. Sandy hair, bright smile, expensive suit that didn't quite match Trevor's predatory elegance. A tech entrepreneur, she'd heard someone say. New money trying to break into old circles. "You must be Beverly," Calvin said, extending his hand when Trevor stepped away to speak with a senator. "Calvin Hale. I don't think we've met." Beverly shook his hand politely. "No, I don't believe we have. You're with Sterling?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were curious, interested. She hesitated. What was she? His possession? His contract? His prisoner in a red dress? "I'm his guest." "Lucky him." Calvin's smile widened. "Would you like to dance? I promise I'm better at waltzing than I am at small talk." It was innocent, harmless, the kind of polite social interaction that happened at events like this. But Beverly felt the temperature drop before she saw him. Trevor materialized beside her like a shadow given form, his hand sliding around her waist with bruising possession. "She's occupied," he said, his voice arctic and absolute. Calvin raised his hands in surrender, smile faltering. "My apologies. Didn't realize. Now you do." Trevor's gray eyes were flat. "Walk away." Calvin walked away. Trevor's fingers dug into Beverly's hip hard enough to leave marks. "Come with me. Now." He didn't wait for her answer. His grip shifted to her wrist, and he pulled her through the crowd with controlled fury, his stride purposeful and unrelenting. They passed curious stares and raised eyebrows, but Trevor didn't care. He pushed through a door marked "Private," pulled her into the study, and slammed it shut behind them. Beverly yanked her wrist free, adrenaline and anger flooding her veins. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Trevor turned on her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Pure, undiluted rage barely leashed beneath his control. "Do you understand what you are to me?" His voice was dangerously quiet, lethal. "What happens if another man even thinks he can touch you?" "He asked me to dance," Beverly shot back, refusing to back down even as he stalked toward her. "It was harmless." "Nothing about you is harmless." Trevor backed her against the door, his body caging hers, his hands braced on either side of her head. "You walk into a room, and men forget they're married. You smile, and they forget their own goddamn names. That dress." His eyes raked over her body with heat that burned. "You think I didn't see every man in that room imagining what you look like without it?" Beverly's pulse thundered. "You're insane. And you're mine." His hand fisted in her hair, tilting her head back, forcing her to meet his blazing stare. "Every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of skin he wanted to touch belongs to me. Say it." "No." Wrong answer. Trevor's mouth crashed against hers with brutal intensity. No gentleness, no hesitation. Just raw, consuming hunger that stole the air from her lungs and the fight from her bones. His teeth caught her lower lip, not quite breaking skin but close enough to sting. His tongue swept into her mouth, demanding surrender. Beverly should have pushed him away, should have slapped him, screamed, done anything but what she did. She kissed him back, desperate, starving. 6 years of buried tension exploding between them like a match to gasoline. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed at her to stop. His groan vibrated against her mouth, primal and possessive, and something inside her shattered completely. Trevor's hand slid from her hair to her throat, not squeezing, just holding, reminding her who was in control. His other hand gripped her hip, fingers digging into the silk of her dress hard enough to bruise. He kissed her like he was trying to brand her, own her, erase every man who'd ever looked at her before him. And God help her, Beverly let him. She opened for him, met every brutal stroke of his tongue with her own, bit his lip when he pulled back, just to make him growl. The sound he made was animal, unhinged, and it sent heat pooling between her thighs. Trevor broke the kiss just long enough to rasp against her mouth. This is what happens when you forget who you belong to. Then he was on her again, his kiss somehow deeper, more savage, spit slicked and filthy and absolutely consuming. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, chests heaving, lips swollen and wet. Beverly's mind was spinning. Her body was on fire. Every nerve ending screamed for more, even as reality crashed back in. "This doesn't change anything," she whispered. Trevor's thumb traced her bruised lower lip, his eyes dark with satisfaction and hunger that hadn't been sated, not even close. "It changes everything." He stepped back, adjusting his tie with steady hands, while Beverly stood against the door. He looked perfectly composed, perfectly controlled, like he hadn't just kissed her into oblivion, like he wasn't still, imagining all the ways he was going to finish what he'd started. "Fix your lipstick," Trevor said calmly. "We're leaving." He opened the door and walked out, leaving Beverly alone with the taste of him still on her tongue and the undeniable truth settling like lead in her chest. She'd just kissed the man who owned her, and she'd liked it. The kiss changed everything. Trevor stopped pretending this was just a contract, stopped maintaining the careful distance he'd held for 2 weeks. The leash he'd kept on himself snapped, and Beverly felt it in every interaction, every moment they shared space in the penthouse that had become both sanctuary and prison. He was everywhere now, his hand sliding along her waist when she passed him in the kitchen, his body crowding hers when she stood at the windows overlooking the city, his voice at her ear, low and dark, whispering promises that made her skin flush and her breath catch. "You taste like sin, Beverly. I can't stop thinking about it. That dress you wore today, I imagined tearing it off you for hours. When I finally take you, you'll forget every man who came before me, including him. Always him. Never Gerald's name, like speaking it would give her dead husband power he no longer deserved." Beverly tried to maintain boundaries, tried to remember why this was wrong. The contract, the ownership, the fact that Gerald had been dead less than a month. But Trevor dismantled her defenses, patient and relentless, until she didn't know where her resistance ended and her desire began. 3 days after the gala, he found her in the library. She'd been reading, or pretending to, curled in an oversized chair with a book she couldn't focus on. Trevor appeared in the doorway, still dressed in his work clothes, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked at her, the way a starving man looks at a feast. "Come here," he said. Not a request. Never a request. Beverly's heart hammered. "I'm reading." "No, you're hiding." Trevor moved into the room, closing the distance with predatory grace. "You've been avoiding me since the gala, since I kissed you, and you kissed me back like you'd been waiting for it as long as I have." "That was a mistake." "Liar." He stopped in front of her chair, towering over her, his presence overwhelming. "Look at me, Beverly." She did. God help her, she did. His eyes were molten silver, burning with want and certainty. "Stand up." Beverly's body obeyed before her mind could protest. She stood, and immediately Trevor's hands were on her, one sliding into her hair, tilting her face up, the other gripping her hip and pulling her flush against him. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her lips. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away right now." She opened her mouth. The words were right there. But they wouldn't come, because she did want this, had wanted it since the funeral, maybe before. wanted him with a desperation that terrified her, that made her hate herself, that felt like betrayal and salvation wrapped into one impossible knot. Trevor saw her surrender before she spoke it. His mouth curved into a dark, satisfied smile. That's what I thought. Then he kissed her. Slower this time, deeper with more possession. His tongue swept against hers in a rhythm. His hand slid into her hair, guiding her without force, deepening the kiss until she felt the quiet authority in the way he held her. His other hand settled at her hip, steady and possessive, drawing her closer, as if there were nowhere else she could be. Beverly gasped against his mouth, and Trevor swallowed the sound, groaning low in his chest. He guided her back without asking, step by step, until she felt the bookshelf at her spine. His body pressed against hers, hard and hot and unforgiving, leaving no space for doubt about what he wanted. What they both wanted. Bedroom, Trevor rasped, against her throat, his teeth grazing her pulse point. Now, or I'll take you right here. Beverly's fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer even as she nodded. Bedroom. He carried her down the hall, not gently, not hesitantly, but with purpose, like a man who had reached the end of his restraint. When he set her on the bed, the care and the motion clashed sharply with the heat in his gaze. Last chance, Trevor said, bracing himself above her, his presence heavy and unyielding. Say no, Beverly. Tell me you don't want this. She reached for him without fear, her hand steady as she drew him closer until their breaths tangled. I want you. 3 words. A confession honest. Something in Trevor gave way. He captured her mouth again, the kiss fierce and consuming, as if he'd been holding himself back for far too long. His focus stayed on her reactions, the way her breath caught, the way she clung to him, as he claimed the moment with single-minded intent. The world narrowed to sensation and closeness, to the certainty of his touch, and the weight of years finally breaking free. Beverly stopped thinking, stopped questioning. There was only Trevor, his voice, his presence, the way he made everything else fade. You're beautiful, he murmured, low and rough. More than I imagined. Her answer was his name, whispered like a plea. Beverly arched into him. Trevor. And he didn't make her wait any longer. Say it again, Trevor murmured, his voice low and unsteady, his mouth lingering at her skin. Trevor, Beverly whispered, breathless. Please. He didn't rush her. He never did. When he finally drew her closer, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. The heat, the closeness, the way his name left her lips like a plea. They moved together slowly at first, discovering a rhythm that felt both overwhelming and inevitable. Trevor's hands guided her with quiet authority, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that left her exposed in ways that had nothing to do with skin. Mine, he said softly, almost reverently. Say it. She should have resisted, should have held on to the distance she'd promised herself. But the moment swallowed her whole, emotion blurring into sensation, restraint giving way to need. Yours, she breathed. Something in Trevor broke then. He held her tighter, deeper, as if anchoring them both in the moment. When she finally unraveled in his arms, her voice caught on his name, and he followed with a low sound against her throat, holding her as if letting go wasn't an option. Afterward, they stayed tangled together, breathing slowly, hearts racing as reality crept back in around them. Beverly lay beneath him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what they'd just done settle over her like a shroud. Tears burned her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. I shouldn't want this, she whispered, her voice breaking. He just died. Gerald just died, and Gerald's been dead to you longer than 3 weeks, Beverly. Trevor's voice was cold, matter of fact. He rolled off her, propping himself on one elbow to look down at her tear-streaked face. Don't lie to yourself. That's not. You didn't love him. Trevor's hand cupped her jaw, forcing her to meet his unflinching gaze. Maybe you never did. Your marriage was empty long before he drowned. You know it. I know it. Stop mourning something that was already dead. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow, because he was right. She hadn't loved Gerald, not the way a wife should love a husband. She'd been grateful to him, indebted to him, trapped by him, but never in love with him. The grief she'd felt at his funeral wasn't for the man. It was for the illusion, the safety he'd represented, the life she'd convinced herself was enough. Trevor saw the moment she accepted it. His thumb brushed away her tears with unexpected tenderness. "You're free now," he said quietly. "Free to want this. Free to want me. Stop punishing yourself for feeling alive." Beverly closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her temples, because he was right about that too. Beverly woke alone in Trevor's bed, sunlight streaming through the room, her body aching in ways that reminded her exactly what they'd done the night before. And again at midnight, and once more just before dawn. She should feel shame, regret, something other than the languid satisfaction humming through her veins. But Trevor had been right about one thing. Gerald had been dead to her long before he drowned. The marriage had been a cage she'd walked into willingly, desperately, 6 years ago, because she'd been running. Beverly sat up, pulling the sheet around her exposed body, and let herself remember what she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. 6 years ago. Daniel Crane had been a mistake from the beginning. Beverly had been 22, fresh out of college, working as a paralegal at a prestigious law firm in Boston. Daniel was 35, a senior partner with a corner office and a smile that promised the world. He'd pursued her relentlessly. Flowers, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard. She'd been flattered, naive, stupid. The first time he hit her was 3 months into their relationship. She'd smiled at a waiter. That's all it took. A polite smile at a man bringing their dessert. And Daniel had grabbed her wrist under the table hard enough to bruise, his grip vice-tight, his smile never faltering for the other diners. "You think you're cute, don't you?" he'd whispered later in the car, his hand around her throat. "Flirting with other men right in front of me, testing me." "I wasn't," his hand had tightened. "Don't lie." Beverly had apologized, convinced herself it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been careless, that it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Again and again and again. Daniel was careful, strategic. He never left marks that couldn't be hidden, never hit her where anyone would see. He controlled her phone, her bank accounts, her access to friends and family, isolated her systematically until she had nowhere to run, no one to call. And when she finally tried to leave, he'd laughed. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Daniel had cornered her in their apartment, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'm a lawyer, sweetheart. A damn good one. I'll bury you in litigation, restraining orders, harassment claims, maybe even suggest you're unstable. Who do you think the courts will believe? A respected partner at one of Boston's top firms, or a paralegal with no family, no money, and a history of emotional instability?" He'd grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. "You're mine, Beverly, forever. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." 2 weeks later, Beverly had emptied what little money she had, packed a single bag, and ran. She'd made it to New York with nothing but fear and determination. Changed her phone number, stayed off social media, slept in her car for 3 nights before finding a shitty studio apartment in Queens she could barely afford. And then she'd met Gerald. He was a client at the temp agency where she'd found work. Charming, successful, safe in ways Daniel had never been. He'd asked her to dinner. She'd said no. He'd asked again. And again. Persistent but never threatening. Kind but never weak. When he'd proposed after 6 months, too fast, too soon, too convenient, Beverly had said yes. Not because she loved him, but because Gerald Miller offered something Daniel Crane had stolen from her. Safety. A new last name. A new life. A marriage that came with legal protections and social legitimacy. Gerald never asked too many questions about her past, never pushed when she flinched at sudden movements or woke up gasping from nightmares. He gave her space, security, and the illusion of normalcy. She'd been grateful. That's all it had ever been. Gratitude. Present day. Now Beverly stared at her hands, twisted in Trevor's expensive sheets, and felt the weight of 6 years of lies pressing down on her chest. The bedroom door opened. Trevor entered with 2 mugs of coffee, wearing nothing but low-slung pajama pants, his muscled torso on full display. He looked at her, and his expression shifted from satisfaction to something sharper. "What's wrong?" He set the mugs on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch, but not touching. Beverly pulled her knees to her chest. "I need to tell you something. About why I married Gerald." Trevor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just listened. So Beverly told him everything. Daniel Crane, the abuse, the control, the fear that had driven her from Boston to New York with nothing but a bag and desperation. The marriage of convenience that had been her only escape. The 6 years she'd spent looking over her shoulder, terrified that Daniel would find her. Trevor's face went cold. Not angry. Worse. Lethal. The kind of cold that promised violence without raising his voice. "Does he know where you are?" His voice was glacier smooth. "I don't think so." Beverly hugged herself tighter. "I disappeared when I married Gerald. Changed my name. Deleted all social media. I've been careful. But you don't know." "No." The admission felt like a failure. "I don't know." Trevor stood abruptly, pacing to the windows, his hands curling into fists at his sides. When he turned back, his eyes were flat, empty, the expression of a man who'd already decided someone's fate. "Daniel Crane," he said quietly. "Lawyer. Boston. Senior partner." It wasn't a question. Beverly nodded, fear spiking through her chest. "Trevor." "What? Are you—" "If he ever finds you—" Trevor crossed the room in 3 strides, cupped her face with both hands, forced her to meet his lethal gaze. "He's a dead man. Do you understand me? I will bury him so deep, no one will ever find the body. You can't. I can do whatever I want, Beverly. Money buys a lot of things. Silence, disappearances, justice when the law fails." His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "No one touches what's mine. Not Gerald. Not some abusive piece of shit from your past. No one." Beverly's throat closed. She should be horrified. Should tell him he was insane, that she didn't need a protector. But looking into his eyes, cold, certain, absolutely unrepentant, she felt something shift inside her chest. Safe. For the first time in 6 years, she felt safe. "He terrified me," she whispered. "For so long, I thought he'd find me. That he won't." Trevor kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, soft and claiming. "I'll make sure of it. You're under my protection now, Beverly. That means something." It did. God help her. It did. The next 2 weeks were a study in control and surrender. Trevor stopped pretending their arrangement was purely contractual. The terms evolved, as he called it, his demands growing more specific, more encompassing, more absolute. "I want to know where you are at all times." He'd said it over breakfast, casual as discussing the weather. "Text me when you leave. Text me when you arrive. If you're going somewhere, I approve it first." Beverly had set down her coffee, fury sparking. "That wasn't in the contract." "The contract says you belong to me." Trevor didn't look up from his tablet. "I'm just clarifying what that means." "You're clarifying yourself into a dictatorship." "Yes." Now he looked at her, gray eyes cold and uncompromising. "I am." "Problem?" Beverly wanted to scream. "This wasn't the deal, Trevor. You said 1 year. You said, I said you'd live where I say, go where I say, answer to me. That's exactly what I'm enforcing." He stood, moved around the table, caged her in with his hands on the armrests of her chair. "You signed the contract, Beverly. You gave me control. Don't act surprised when I use it. This is insane. This is ownership. His face was inches from hers. And you agreed to it. So yes, you'll text me. You'll tell me where you're going. You'll ask permission before making plans, because that's the deal you signed. Beverly shoved at his chest. He didn't budge. I'm not some doll you can control. No. Trevor's hand caught her jaw, firm but not painful. You're mine. There's a difference, and the sooner you stop fighting it, the easier this will be. He walked away, leaving her trembling with rage and something darker she didn't want to name. But it wasn't all dominance and control. There were moments, small, unexpected, where Trevor's walls cracked and Beverly saw the man beneath the ruthless exterior. Like when she'd had a panic attack in the middle of the night, Daniel Crane's face haunting her dreams. Trevor had appeared without being called, pulled her into his arms, and held her while she shook. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, just held her until her breathing steadied and the fear receded. Or when he'd noticed she'd stopped eating properly, her grief and anxiety stealing her appetite. He'd started having meals delivered to whatever room she was in, sitting with her silently until she ate, his presence both infuriating and comforting. Or the afternoon she'd mentioned missing her piano, sold when Gerald's debts came due. 3 days later, a Steinway Grand appeared in the penthouse library, gleaming black and absolutely perfect. You didn't have to do that, Beverly had whispered, running her fingers over the keys. Yes, I did. Trevor had been standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Play something. She had. And he'd listened. Those moments confused her, made her question everything she thought she understood about him, about them, about this twisted arrangement they'd fallen into. 4 weeks in, Beverly woke up and realized something terrifying. She wasn't just trapped, she was falling. Falling for the man who owned her contract and was systematically claiming every piece of her life. Falling for his cold control and his unexpected gentleness. Falling for the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. Trevor found her on the balcony that evening, staring out at the city, lost in thought. What are you thinking about? He asked, his arms wrapping around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. Beverly leaned into him, hating herself for how natural it felt. How much I should hate you. Should? His lips brushed her temple. But you don't. No. The admission was quiet, honest. I don't. Trevor turned her in his arms, tilted her face up to his. Good. Because I'm not letting you go, Beverly. Not in 11 months. Not ever. The contract, screw the contract. His kiss was fierce, claiming. This stopped being about the contract weeks ago. You know that. She did. God help her, she did. Beverly kissed him back, surrendering to the impossible truth that had been building since the funeral, since the contract, since the first time he'd touched her and made her feel alive instead of safe. She was falling in love with Trevor Sterling, and there was no going back. The file arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by Trevor's head of security with a grim expression and no unnecessary words. Beverly was in the library, playing piano, lost in a Chopin nocturne when she heard Trevor's office door slam hard enough to rattle the walls. The music died under her fingers. She'd never heard him lose control like that. Not the man who wielded composure like a weapon. Something was wrong. She found him standing behind his desk, hands braced on the polished surface, shoulders rigid with tension. A manila folder lay open in front of him, papers scattered across the desktop like evidence at a crime scene. Trevor? He didn't look up. Leave. The single word was ice and razor blades. Beverly's instinct was to obey, to retreat to safety the way she'd learned to do with Daniel. But this wasn't Daniel. And despite everything, the contract, the control, the twisted power dynamics, she trusted Trevor in ways she'd never trusted her ex. She closed the door behind her and moved closer. What happened? I said leave, Beverly. And I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's wrong. She rounded the desk, saw his white-knuckled grip, the muscle ticking in his jaw. Talk to me. Trevor's head lifted slowly, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Cold fury, barely leashed. The kind of rage that could destroy cities if given form. "Your husband," he said quietly, each word precisely enunciated, "was a thief." Beverly's stomach dropped. "What?" Trevor shoved the file toward her. "See for yourself." She picked up the top document, a financial audit, dense with numbers and transaction codes she barely understood. But some things were clear enough. Transfers, withdrawals, dates spanning back 18 months, money moving from Sterling Ventures accounts into offshore holdings, then disappearing into a maze of shell companies. "I don't understand," Beverly whispered. "This is embezzlement." Trevor's voice was flat. "Dead. Gerald stole from my company to cover his gambling debts. Started small, a few thousand here and there, then tens of thousands. By the end, he was siphoning off nearly 100,000 a month. The numbers blurred in front of her eyes. How much total? $1.7 million. Beverly's legs gave out. She caught herself on the edge of the desk, the file slipping from her nerveless fingers. Gerald had stolen from Trevor, from the man who'd called him best friend, business partner, brother. "When did you find out?" Her voice sounded distant, hollow. Trevor's jaw tightened. 14 months ago. The confession hit her like a physical blow. 14 months. Over a year. He'd known for over a year. "You knew?" Beverly stared at him, trying to process what that meant. "You knew Gerald was stealing from you and you— what? Just let him?" "It's more complicated than that." "Explain it to me then." Her voice rose, fury and confusion warring in her chest. "Make me understand why you'd let your supposed best friend rob you blind." Trevor moved so fast, she didn't have time to react. He bore. Hands gripped her shoulders, not rough, but firm, forcing her to meet his blazing stare. "Because I wanted him gone," he said, each word deliberately spoken. "I wanted him out of your life, Beverly. And I knew. His recklessness would eventually destroy him." The admission hung between them, terrible and honest. 14 months ago, Trevor had confronted Gerald in this same office, laid the evidence on the desk between them with the same controlled fury he wore now. $340,000, Trevor had said, tapping the audit report. "That's what you've stolen from me so far. Want to explain why my best friend, my business partner, is embezzling from Sterling Ventures?" Gerald had gone pale, then red, then defiant. "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" "Your gambling winnings." Trevor's voice had been ice. "You're drowning, Gerald. Casino debts, loan sharks, credit cards maxed to oblivion. You're bleeding money faster than you can steal it. I have a plan." "You have nothing." Trevor had leaned forward, every word a scalpel. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to confess to Beverly tonight. You're going to tell her about the debts, the gambling, the stealing. Then you're going to divorce her, cleanly and quietly, and disappear from both our lives." Gerald had laughed. Actually laughed. "You think I'm going to just give her to you? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You want my wife? You don't deserve her. Maybe not." Gerald's smile had been ugly, spiteful. "But she's mine. And I'm not giving her up. Not to you. Not to anyone. Then I'll destroy you." Trevor's voice had dropped to a lethal whisper. "I'll take everything. Your reputation, your business, your freedom. I'll bury you so deep you'll wish you'd taken the divorce." Gerald had stood, straightened his tie with shaking hands. "Do your worst, Sterling. I'm not afraid of you. You should be." But Gerald hadn't confessed, hadn't come clean, hadn't done a single thing Trevor demanded. He'd kept stealing instead. And Trevor had let him. "You let him keep stealing?" Beverly jerked away from Trevor's grip, horror and betrayal warring in her chest. "You knew what he was doing and you just— what? Waited for him to self-destruct?" "Yes." Trevor didn't flinch from her accusation. "I gave him a chance to do the right thing. He refused. So I documented every transaction, every theft, every time he chose his addiction over you. I knew eventually his debts would catch up to him, that the people he'd borrowed from would come collecting, that he'd have nowhere left to run. You wanted him ruined. Beverly's voice shook. You wanted him destroyed so you could… What? Swoop in and save me? Play the hero? I wanted him gone. Trevor's control cracked, just slightly. I wanted you free of a man who lied to you, used you, put your name on loans without your knowledge, and gambled away any chance at a real future. Yes, Beverly. I wanted Gerald gone. Not dead, but out of your life. Permanently. And then he drowned. The words tasted like ash. 3 weeks after you decided to let him destroy himself, he drowned. Convenient. Trevor's eyes went flat. What exactly are you accusing me of? Beverly's hands clenched into fists. Did you get your wish, Trevor? Did Gerald's recklessness destroy him, or did you help things along? The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor stared at her, his expression unreadable, and for the first time since she'd signed that contract, Beverly felt genuine fear. Not of physical violence. Trevor would never hurt her that way. But of the answer she might not want to hear. Gerald drowned because he was drunk, reckless, and thought he could outrun consequences, Trevor said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. I didn't kill him, Beverly, but I'm not sorry he's dead. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He turned away, dismissing her with the gesture. Gerald made his choices. He stole. He lied. He destroyed himself. I just didn't stop him. Beverly stood there, her world tilting on its axis, trying to reconcile the man she was falling for with the monster who'd orchestrated her husband's downfall. I need time, she whispered. I need to think. Take all the time you need. Trevor's voice was cold, final. But you're not leaving this penthouse. The contract is still active, Beverly. You still belong to me. She fled, back to her room. And for the first time since signing that contract, Beverly wondered if she'd traded one controlling man for another, or something far worse. The message came 3 days after the confrontation about Gerald. Beverly had been avoiding Trevor as much as their shared space allowed, eating, alone, spending hours in the library, sleeping in her own room with the door locked. He let her have the distance, though she felt his eyes tracking her movements, felt the tension coiling tighter with every hour of silence between them. She was curled in the window seat overlooking the city when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the message. I know where you are, Bev. We're not finished. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering against the glass. No. No, no, no! Her hands shook as she retrieved it, staring at the words that made her blood turn to ice. Only one person had ever called her Bev. Only one person would phrase it exactly like that. A promise and a threat wrapped in false intimacy. Daniel. A second message appeared. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? Mrs. Miller. Or should I say, Mrs. Sterling. Interesting upgrade. Beverly's breath came in short, sharp gasps. He knew. Daniel knew where she was, who she was with, everything. The carefully constructed safety she'd built over 6 years was crumbling, and she could feel his presence like ice water down her spine. A third message. I'm in New York. We need to talk. Soon. Beverly's vision blurred. The room spun. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. Beverly. Trevor's voice cut through her panic. She hadn't heard him enter, but suddenly he was there, kneeling in front of her, his hands gripping her shoulders. Breathe, he commanded, his voice steady and absolute. Look at me and breathe. She tried. Failed. Tried again. Her chest was too tight, her lungs refusing to cooperate. Trevor cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Do it. Now. The authority in his tone cut through the panic. Beverly inhaled shakily, exhaled, repeated until the room stopped spinning and reality snapped back into focus. Good. Trevor's thumbs stroked her cheeks. Now tell me what happened. Beverly wordlessly handed him her phone. She watched his expression shift as he read the messages, from concern to cold, lethal fury in the space of 3 seconds. His jaw turned to stone. His eyes went flat and empty, the look of a man who'd already decided someone's fate and was simply calculating logistics. "Daniel Crane," Trevor said quietly. Not a question. Beverly nodded, unable to speak past the fear lodged in her throat. Trevor stood abruptly, pulling his own phone from his pocket. He made 3 calls in rapid succession, his voice clipped and commanding. "Lock down the building. No one gets past the lobby without facial recognition clearance. I want security doubled on every floor, and I want it done 10 minutes ago." Then a pause. "Run a full background on Daniel Crane. Lawyer, Boston, mid-40s. I want his location, his contacts, his financials, his goddamn shoe size, everything." Then another pause. "Yes, I'm authorizing surveillance. Legal gray area means I don't care. Just do it." He ended the calls and turned back to Beverly, his expression softening fractionally. "He won't touch you. I promise you that." "You don't understand." Beverly's voice shook. "Daniel doesn't make empty threats. If he says he knows where I am, he's already planned his next move. He's calculating, Trevor. Methodical. He'll find a way. Then I'll be ready." Trevor crouched in front of her again, taking her cold hands in his. "Listen to me. Daniel Crane is a lawyer. I'm a billionaire with resources he can't imagine. Security teams, private investigators. Legal power that makes his firm look like a lemonade stand. He thinks he's dangerous? He has no idea what I'm capable of." Beverly searched his face, saw the absolute conviction there. The cold promise of violence barely restrained beneath civilized veneer. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. Trevor's smile was razor sharp. "Whatever it takes. He wants to play games. I'll destroy everything he's built." The word should have terrified her. Instead, Beverly felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Safety. The certainty that for the first time in 6 years, someone was actually capable of protecting her from the monster in her past. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I know." Trevor pulled her to her feet, wrapped his arms around her, held her against his chest with fierce possession. "But you don't have to be. Not anymore. I've got you, Beverly. And I protect what's mine." She buried her face in his shirt, breathing in his scent. Sandalwood and control and dark promises. "I'm sorry. For avoiding you. For being angry about Gerald. We'll deal with that later." Trevor's hand slid into her hair, cradling her head. "Right now, the only thing that matters is keeping you safe." The call came 2 hours later. Trevor was on his laptop, tracking Daniel's digital footprint with his security team, when the building's head of security appeared on his private line. "Mr. Sterling, we have a situation." Trevor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "There's a man in the lobby, Daniel Crane. He's demanding to see Ms. Miller." Beverly, sitting across from Trevor with a barely touched cup of tea, went white. Trevor's expression didn't change, but Beverly saw his hand curl into a fist on the desk. "Is he alone?" "Yes, sir." "Claims he has legal documents that require Ms. Miller's signature. Says it's urgent." "Tell him Ms. Miller isn't available." "We did, sir. He's insistent, threatening to file harassment charges if we don't allow access. Claims Ms. Miller is being held against her will." Trevor's laugh was cold and humorless. "Of course he is. Keep him in the lobby. I'm coming down." "Trevor, no!" Beverly stood abruptly, fear spiking through her. "Don't go down there. Don't engage with him. That's what he wants. He'll twist everything, manipulate. I know exactly what he'll do." Trevor crossed to her, gripped her shoulders. "Which is why I'm handling this now. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "Please." Trevor kissed her, hard and possessive. "Trust me." Then he was gone, leaving Beverly alone with her racing heart and the terrible certainty that the 2 most dangerous men in her life were about to collide. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a battlefield. Trevor adjusted his cufflinks, schooled his expression into bored indifference, and stepped into the lobby like a king entering his throne room. Daniel Crane stood near the security desk, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, dark hair graying at the temples, handsome in that polished, predatory way of men who knew how to weaponize charm. He looked up as Trevor approached, and his smile was all calculated menace. "Trevor Sterling." Daniel extended his hand. "I've heard so much about you." Trevor ignored the hand. "You have 30 seconds to state your business and leave my building." Daniel's smile widened. "Straight to the point. I appreciate that. I'm here to see Beverly Miller. Or is it Beverly Sterling now? Hard to keep track with how quickly she moves on from dead husbands." Trevor's control slipped fractionally. His voice dropped to lethal quiet. 20 seconds. "I have legal documents that require her signature," Daniel continued smoothly, pulling papers from his briefcase. "Regarding assets from our relationship that she stole when she ran. I'm willing to settle out of court, but I need to speak with her directly." "Beverly isn't available. Is she here willingly?" Daniel's eyes glittered with malice. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she traded one controlling situation for another. And as someone who cares about her well-being, I have to wonder if she needs rescue." The threat was clear, veiled in concern, wrapped in legal justification, but a threat nonetheless. Trevor stepped closer, invading Daniel's space with predatory intent. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, meant only for the man in front of him. "You have 10 seconds to walk out that door and never contact Beverly again, or I will make your life a living hell. Every case you're working, every client you represent, every skeleton in your closet, and we both know you have them, will be exposed. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed, and when you have nothing left, when you're drowning in the ruins I've created, I'll make sure you know exactly who did it and why." Daniel's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear. Recognition. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Sterling?" "I'm promising you." Trevor's smile was glacial. "Leave. Now. Or find out what happens when you threaten what's mine." For a long moment, they stood locked in silent battle, two people sizing each other up. Finally, Daniel stepped back, tucked his papers away. "This isn't over." "Yes," Trevor said quietly. "It is." Daniel walked toward the exit, then paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. "Tell Bev I'll be seeing her soon, whether you like it or not." Then he was gone. Trevor stood in the lobby, his hands curled into fists, every instinct screaming to follow the man and finish this permanently. But he didn't, because Beverly was upstairs, terrified and waiting. And protecting her mattered more than destroying her past. For now. Beverly was pacing when Trevor returned, back and forth across the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, every nerve-ending screaming danger. She'd heard the elevator doors open, had held her breath waiting for Trevor's footsteps, or, worse, Daniel's voice calling her name. When Trevor walked in alone, something in her chest loosened fractionally. "Is he gone?" Her voice was small, fragile. "Yes." Trevor closed the distance between them, his hand settling on her shoulders. "He's gone. For now." Beverly pulled away, resumed her pacing. "You don't understand. Daniel doesn't just give up. He's patient, strategic. He'll find another way to get to me. He always does. Not this time. You don't know him." "I know enough." Trevor caught her wrist, stopped her mid-stride, forced her to look at him. "He came here with legal documents, claims you stole assets from him when you left Boston. Money, jewelry, property that belonged to both of you. It's bullshit, Beverly, but he's building a case." Her blood turned to ice. "I didn't steal anything. I left with one bag and whatever cash I had in my account. That's it. I know that. You know that. But Daniel's a lawyer. He knows how to twist the truth, how to make lies sound convincing in court." Trevor's jaw tightened. He threatened to file charges. Theft, fraud, maybe even suggest you're mentally unstable and being manipulated by me. Beverly's laugh was hollow, bitter. "Of course he did. That's his playbook. Make me look crazy, make himself look like the victim. By the time he's done, no one will believe anything I say. I'll believe you. The words were simple. Absolute. Beverly's throat closed. It won't matter. Daniel has connections. Money. He'll drag this out in court for years, destroy my reputation, make my life hell. And even if I win, he'll still find ways to hurt me. Anonymous complaints to my employer. False police reports. Restraining orders claiming I'm the one harassing him. Her voice cracked. You can't fight someone who has no ethics, Trevor. You just survive. And hope they get bored. I don't survive. Trevor's voice was cold steel. I make problems go away. He's not a business competitor you can buy out or intimidate. No. He's worse. He's a man who hurt you, who thinks he still has power over you, who walked into my building and threatened what's mine. Trevor's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his lethal gaze. I'm not letting that stand, Beverly. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what lines I have to cross. Daniel Crane is done. Beverly wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that someone could actually protect her from the nightmare that had haunted her for 6 years. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. Daniel always gets what he wants, she whispered. Always. Not this time. Trevor's thumb traced her cheekbone. Do you trust me? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Beverly thought about the contract, the way Trevor had manipulated Gerald's downfall and orchestrated her surrender. She thought about his cold threats and colder control, the way he demanded everything and gave nothing back except the twisted safety of his possession. She should say no, should recognize that trading one controlling man for another was just a different cage. But Trevor had held her through panic attacks, had bought her a piano without being asked, had looked at Daniel Crane with the kind of lethal promise that said he'd burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her. Yes, Beverly said finally, quietly. I trust you. Something shifted in Trevor's expression, softened, just fractionally, before the ruthless control snapped back into place. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with fierce possession. Then let me handle him. My way. Beverly buried her face in his shirt, breathing him in, and tried not to think about what my way meant when spoken by a man capable of destroying lives with a phone call. What are you going to do? She asked. Trevor's hand slid into her hair, cradling her head. Whatever it takes. It wasn't an answer. It was a promise. And Beverly wasn't sure if she should be relieved or terrified. The restraining order arrived 48 hours after Daniel's visit. Beverly was reading in the library when Trevor's lawyer appeared, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast. She handed Trevor a stack of legal documents with an expression that promised war. Daniel Crane filed this morning, she said without preamble. Temporary restraining order against you, claiming you're holding Beverly Miller against her will. Coercion, false imprisonment, potential kidnapping charges if he can prove she's being detained. Beverly's book slipped from her fingers. Trevor's face went blank, the dangerous kind of blank. On what grounds? He claims Ms. Miller contacted him for help, that she's being isolated and controlled, that her recent behavior is inconsistent with her character. He's painting himself as a concerned ex-fiancé, trying to rescue her from an abusive situation. The lawyer's mouth thinned, and he's filed a police report. Of course he has. Trevor's voice was ice. What else? Media picked it up 2 hours ago. Billionaire Trevor Sterling under investigation for holding widow against her will. It's already trending. TMZ has photographers camped outside the building. Beverly stood abruptly, her heart pounding. This is insane. I'm here voluntarily. I can leave whenever I want. She stopped, because that wasn't entirely true, was it? The contract, 365 days. She'd signed away her freedom, and if Daniel's lawyers dug deep enough, if they found that document, Trevor would be destroyed. Held against will. Coercion, if they wanted to push it that far. and she'd be the victim who'd signed her own captivity. Trevor's eyes met hers across the room. She saw the calculation there, the cold assessment of exactly how badly this could go. Beverly needs to make a statement, the lawyer said. Voluntary, on record, confirming she's here of her own free will. It's the fastest way to kill this before it becomes criminal. No, Trevor's voice was flat. Absolute. She's not making any statement without counsel present, and she's sure as hell not talking to police without— I'll do it, Beverly interrupted. Both of them turned to stare at her. I'll talk to the police. I'll make a statement. Whatever it takes to end this. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Daniel's lying, and I won't let him destroy you with his manipulations. Trevor crossed to her in 3 strides, gripped her shoulders. Beverly, listen to me. The moment you talk to police, they'll ask questions about our relationship, about Gerald's debts, about how you came to be living here. If they find the contract, they won't. She met his gaze with determination she'd pulled from somewhere deep and desperate. Because I'll tell them the truth. My truth. That I'm here because I want to be. The police arrived that afternoon. 2 detectives, 1 male, 1 female, both wearing expressions of professional skepticism. They set up in Trevor's conference room, asked Beverly to sit, informed her she wasn't under arrest, but they had questions regarding Daniel Crane's allegations. Trevor's lawyer sat beside her. Trevor himself stood by the windows, silent and coiled tight, watching every word. Ms. Miller, the female detective began, her tone gentle. We need to ask you some direct questions. Are you being held here against your will? Beverly didn't hesitate. No. Do you feel safe in this residence? Yes. Has Mr. Sterling ever threatened you, coerced you, or prevented you from leaving? Beverly thought about the contract, the ownership, the commands and control and possession. No, she lied smoothly. I'm here because I choose to be. The male detective leaned forward. Ms. Miller, if you're afraid of Mr. Sterling, if he's threatened retaliation or— I'm not afraid of him. Beverly's voice strengthened. Daniel Crane is my ex. He was abusive, controlling. I left him 6 years ago, changed my name, disappeared. He found me after my husband died, and now he's trying to manipulate the system to get me back under his control. That's what's happening here, not whatever story he's sold you. The detectives exchanged glances. Mr. Crane claims you contacted him for help, the female detective said carefully. That you told him you were being isolated, that Mr. Sterling was controlling your finances, your movements. I never contacted Daniel, not once. He found me. He sent threatening messages. He showed up at this building uninvited. Beverly pulled out her phone, showed them the messages Daniel had sent. Does this look like someone I asked for help? The male detective examined the phone, his expression shifting slightly. Why did you leave Boston 6 years ago, Ms. Miller? Beverly's throat tightened. Because Daniel Crane hit me, strangled me, controlled every aspect of my life, and threatened to destroy me if I tried to leave. So I ran, and I've been running ever since. Silence. Trevor's hands clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. Do you have documentation of this abuse? The female detective asked quietly. Police reports, medical records, restraining orders? No, Beverly's voice cracked. Because I was too scared to file. Because Daniel's a lawyer with connections, and I was a paralegal with nothing. Because I knew he'd twist everything and make me look crazy, which is exactly what he's doing now. The detectives looked at each other again. Some unspoken communication passed between them. We'll need to verify some of this information, the male detective said finally. But based on what you've told us, Miss Miller, and the messages you've shown us, this appears to be a harassment situation rather than a false imprisonment case. Relief flooded through Beverly so fast it made her dizzy. However, the female detective added, we'll be keeping this investigation open. If anything changes, if you feel unsafe at any point, you contact us immediately. Understood? Understood. They left 20 minutes later, taking copies of Daniel's messages, promising to follow up with additional questions for Mr. Crane. The moment the door closed, Trevor was on her. He pulled Beverly into his arms, buried his face in her hair, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world tilting sideways. "You could have walked away," he said quietly. "You could have told them about the contract, exposed everything. They would have protected you from me and from Daniel." "I know. Why didn't you?" Beverly pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Because the contract stopped to matter weeks ago, Trevor. I'm not here because of debt or obligation or some legal agreement. I'm here because I choose to be. Because despite everything, the manipulation, the control, the twisted way we started, I choose you." Something broke in Trevor's expression, shattered and reformed into something raw and real. "Beverly," she kissed him, cut off whatever he was going to say with her mouth on his, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Trevor's forehead rested against hers. "No more contract," he said roughly. "No more conditions. Just us. Stay because you want to. Leave if you don't. But know this, I'm never letting you go without a fight." Beverly smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Then I guess you'll never have to fight. Because I'm not going anywhere." That night, Beverly surrendered completely. Not because of obligation, not because of debt, but because she wanted to. She went to Trevor's room, climbed into his bed, and gave herself to him without conditions or contracts or anything between them but want and need and the terrifying, exhilarating reality of choice. And when Trevor made love to her, slow and claiming and absolutely devastating, Beverly finally understood the difference between being owned and being cherished. It felt like freedom. They lay tangled in Trevor's bed as dawn broke over the city, gold light spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Beverly's head rested on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns over his skin. For the first time since signing that contract, she felt completely at peace. "Tell me about the dinner," she said quietly. Trevor's hand stilled in her hair. "What dinner?" "The one where we met, 6 years ago." Beverly propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You said you wanted me from the moment Gerald introduced us. Tell me about that night." Trevor was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face like he was deciding how much truth she could handle. Then he started talking. It was a business dinner at the Modern. Gerald had just closed a deal that made Sterling Ventures a significant profit, $3.2 million from a tech startup acquisition. I was celebrating his success, buying champagne I couldn't afford yet, playing the magnanimous partner. Trevor's voice was distant, remembering. Gerald showed up late. He was always late. But that night, he had you with him. Beverly's breath caught. You wore a green dress, fitted, elegant. Your hair was down, curling over your shoulders. You smiled when Gerald introduced us, and I remember thinking I'd never seen anyone so beautiful in my entire life. Trevor's hand cupped her face. And then Gerald said, "This is Beverly, my fiancée. We're getting married in 3 months." "I remember," Beverly whispered. "You looked at me like I wanted to take out my best friend and steal you right there in front of everyone." Trevor's smile was dark. "Because that's exactly what I wanted. Gerald knew it too. I saw it in his eyes, the smugness, the possession. He'd won something I wanted, and he was making damn sure I knew it." Beverly's stomach twisted. "You think he married me to compete with you?" "I think Gerald saw the way I looked at you and decided you were the ultimate prize." Trevor's jaw tightened. We'd always been competitive. Business, women, success. Everything was a game to see who could win. But you were different. You weren't just another acquisition. You were the acquisition. The one thing he knew I wanted that he could take first. That's sick. That was Gerald. Trevor sat up, pulling Beverly with him until they were face to face. I tried to stay away, told myself it was just attraction, that it would fade. I threw myself into work, dated other women, avoided every dinner party and business function where you'd be present. But it didn't matter. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Couldn't stop wondering if you were happy, if Gerald treated you right, if you ever thought about me the way I thought about you. Beverly's throat closed. I did. Trevor's eyes darkened. What? I thought about you. The confession tumbled out, raw and honest. At my wedding, I kept looking for you in the crowd. You weren't there. Gerald said you had a business emergency, but I wondered if you stayed away on purpose. I did. Trevor's voice was rough. Because if I'd watched you marry him, I would have stopped the wedding, stood up when the priest asked if anyone objected and told the truth, that you belonged with me, not him, that Gerald was marrying you for the wrong reasons, and I was letting you go for the wrong ones. Loyalty, Beverly said quietly. Misplaced loyalty to a man who didn't deserve it. Trevor's hand slid into her hair. I stayed away for 2 years, built my company, made my fortune, convinced myself I was over you. And then Gerald invited me to your anniversary party. Beverly remembered that night, the tension, the way Trevor had looked at her across the crowded restaurant, hungry, haunted, barely controlled. You left early, she said, because watching him touch you, kiss you, play the devoted husband when I knew he was lying to you about everything. Trevor's control cracked slightly. I wanted to burn his life down, wanted to expose every secret, every lie, every way he was failing you. But I didn't, because you'd made your choice, and I had to respect that, even though it destroyed you. Even though. Trevor pulled her closer. And then Gerald started stealing from me. At first I thought it was desperation, the gambling debts piling up, the bad investments. But when I confronted him, when I gave him a chance to come clean, he laughed in my face, said he'd never give you up, that you were his, and I'd just have to live with it. Beverly's hands fisted in the sheets. So you let him destroy himself? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. I documented every theft, tracked every transaction, let him dig his own grave deeper and deeper until there was no way out. I knew eventually his recklessness would catch up to him, that the people he owed money to would come collecting, that his lies would unravel and you'd finally see who he really was. And then he died. Trevor's expression went cold, shuddered. Gerald went out on his boat drunk, in rough seas, ignoring every safety protocol. He made a choice that killed him, Beverly. I didn't push him into the ocean. I didn't sabotage his boat. I didn't arrange some tragic accident. His eyes met hers with unflinching honesty. But I'm not sorry he's gone. I'm not sorry you're free. I'm not sorry I got exactly what I wanted. The confession hung between them, brutal, honest, unrepentant. Beverly should be horrified, should recognize the manipulation, the obsession, the 6 years of calculated patience that had led to this moment. Instead, she said, I should hate you. Trevor's smile was sad, knowing. But you don't. No. Beverly cupped his face, forced him to see the truth in her eyes. I don't. Because Gerald's choices were his own. You didn't force any of that. You just didn't stop it. Some would say that's the same thing. Maybe. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. But I'm not some. I'm the woman you spent 6 years wanting, the one you manipulated circumstances to possess, the one you're telling the truth to now, even though it might destroy what we have. Trevor's hands gripped her waist. Does it? Destroy what we have? The confession hung between them, brutal, honest, unrepentant. Beverly thought about Gerald, the empty marriage, the lies. Then she thought about Trevor, the darkness and the obsession and the twisted, terrible honesty of wanting something so badly you'd burn the world to get it. No, she said finally. It doesn't destroy what we have, because at least you're honest about what you are. Gerald pretended to be my savior while using me as a trophy. You don't pretend. You own your darkness. And you can live with that? Beverly kissed him, deep, claiming, honest. I can love that. Trevor went still. What? I love you. The words came easier than she expected. I love your control, and your possessiveness, and your ruthless protection. I love that you waited 6 years rather than take what you wanted by force. I love that you're telling me the truth now, even knowing I might walk away." She pulled back, met his shocked gaze. "I love you, Trevor Sterling." Trevor's composure shattered completely. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air, desperate, consuming, reverent. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that looked dangerously like tears. "I love you," he said roughly. "I've loved you since that dinner 6 years ago. I loved you through your marriage. I loved you at Gerald's funeral. I love you now, every goddamn day." His hands framed her face. "You're not my possession, Beverly. You're my everything." Beverly's tears spilled over. "Then keep me. Not because of a contract, not because of debt, just because you want to." "Always," Trevor promised. "For the rest of my life." 3 days later, Daniel Crane's world began to collapse. An anonymous tip reached his law firm. Ethics violations, misappropriated funds, evidence tampering. Within 48 hours, the Massachusetts Bar Association had 5 years of documented misconduct, forged signatures, falsified evidence, witness intimidation. Then 3 women came forward. Restraining orders Daniel's lawyers had buried, hospital records, a pattern of abuse that destroyed his carefully crafted image. Beverly watched it unfold from Trevor's penthouse, news reports multiplying by the hour. "How did you do this?" she asked quietly. Trevor stood at the windows, expression calm and ruthless. "Money, resources, private investigators." He glanced at her. "Daniel left a trail. I followed it. In 3 days. I've been following it since he sent you that first message." His smile was cold. "I protect what's mine." Beverly should be disturbed. She felt relief instead. Within a week, Daniel was disbarred. His firm condemned him. Clients filed complaints. Associates turned witness. Daniel Crane left Boston in disgrace. Beverly saw the final report. Daniel surrounded by reporters, face haggard and defeated. No more polished charm, just a broken man whose sins had caught up to him. "He's gone," Trevor said, hands settling on her shoulders. "Career destroyed. Criminal charges pending. He'll spend the next decade buried in litigation." Beverly turned in his arms. "You're terrifying." Trevor's smile was unapologetic. "Only to people who threaten what's mine." This was who Trevor Sterling really was, not the charming businessman, the ruthless destroyer who eliminated obstacles with surgical precision, the man who'd loved her for 6 years and dismantled anyone who stood between them. She should run. Instead, she kissed him. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For protecting me, for destroying the monster I couldn't escape, for loving me enough to cross every line." Trevor kissed her. "I'd burn the world down if that's what it took." Beverly believed him, and she loved him for it. Beverly woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Trevor's arm draped across her waist. 1 year and 3 months since Gerald's funeral. 1 year and 1 month since the contract had expired. She'd never left. "You're thinking too loud," Trevor murmured against her neck. "It's Sunday." Beverly turned in his arms. "I was thinking about the contract, that it expired 4 months ago and I'm still here. No legal obligation, no debt. No reason to stay, except that I want to." "Do you? Want to stay?" It was the first time he'd asked. Beverly kissed him softly. "Every single day." Trevor's grip tightened. "Good, because I have something to ask you." He was out of bed, pulling on pajama pants. "Get dressed. Something nice. We're going out." "Trevor, it's 8 in the morning. Trust me." Beverly got dressed. Trevor took her to the roof, 42 floors above the city, a private terrace with panoramic views of Manhattan spread out like a kingdom, the morning sun painting everything gold. A table set for 2. White linen, fresh flowers, champagne. Her favorite breakfast was perfectly arranged. "Trevor!" Beverly turned to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "What is this?" "Breakfast." He pulled out her chair. Sit. They ate in comfortable silence. When the plates were cleared, Trevor took her hand and guided her to the edge of the terrace, his arms wrapping around her from behind. I was offering you a way out at Gerald's funeral, he said quietly. Freedom. Safety. A chance to choose your own life. His hands framed her face. I was offering you me. Even then. Trevor released her, stepped back, and dropped to one knee. Beverly's breath stopped. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opened it to reveal an emerald-cut diamond on a platinum band. Simple, devastating, perfect. Beverly Miller, Trevor said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I've loved you for 6 years. I've waited for you, manipulated circumstances to have you, crossed every moral line to keep you. I've owned you by contract and possessed you by choice. But now I'm asking you to choose me, not because of debt, not because of obligation, but because you want to. Marry me, not as my possession, as my wife, my partner, my equal in every way that matters. Tears spilled down Beverly's cheeks. I've been yours since the funeral, she whispered. You know that. Is that a yes? Beverly dropped to her knees in front of him, cupped his face, and kissed him with everything she had. Yes, she said against his mouth. Yes, Trevor. I'll marry you. Trevor slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her into his arms, and held her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because to him, she was. They married 3 months later. No grand society wedding. Just them, a judge, Trevor's lawyer as witness, and the same rooftop terrace where he'd proposed. Beverly wore white, simple, elegant, chosen by her and no one else. Trevor wore a black suit that made him look dangerously beautiful and utterly unrepentant. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, when Trevor kissed her with possessive reverence, Beverly felt the final piece of her fractured life click into place. They belonged to each other now, officially, completely. No contracts, no conditions, just a choice. That night, they stood on the terrace under stars and city lights, Beverly wrapped in Trevor's arms, her wedding band catching the light. I love you, Mrs. Sterling. I love you too. Beverly turned in his embrace, reached up to pull his mouth down to hers. My dark, obsessive, absolutely terrifying husband. Trevor kissed her, slow, deep, claiming. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. 6 years too late, but worth every second of waiting, widow. Beverly smiled through happy tears. I'm not a widow anymore. No. Trevor's smile was dark, satisfied, completely his. Now you're mine. Finally. Legally. Forever. Forever, Beverly agreed. Trevor had waited 6 years. She'd been running for just as long, but now they were both exactly where they belonged. Together, obsessed, unrepentant, and home. Thank you for staying till the end. If you're still here, you're now part of the family. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. If you love dark romance stories, you shouldn't miss every story on this channel.